Last week, news of CVE 44228 or Log4j shell absolutely engulfed the cybersecurity world in a fire of anxiety. 2021 has already seen some pretty huge cybersecurity incidents, but where does this rank and how dangerous is the Log4j exploit? Well, according to this totally legit poll that I took on Twitter, it might actually be the worst one that we've seen yet. In fact, and this may not even be hyperbole, I've seen several cybersecurity researchers say that this might be the worst cybersecurity exploit of the decade. Now, on that poll, that was actually checking with network admins and cybersecurity folks that I'm interacting with on Twitter. So that isn't necessarily, a totally illegitimate poll. That's a lot of very intelligent people. So that poll is actually, in my opinion, a little bit more legit than, you might think. But really, why is Log4j and this exploit such a huge deal? After all, isn't this just some Minecraft exploit from 2B2T? Like, really, how bad can it really be? Well, we're going to talk about that. To start, let's understand the attack surface that this exploit has. According to Java, over 3 billion devices around the world use Java. That's quite a lot. And the probability that every single one of those systems is running the most recent patch, they're totally up to date, that's really astronomically slim. In fact, more realistically, most of those are probably very outdated and very vulnerable to an exploit like this, in addition to several other vulnerabilities and exploits out there. So that's Java, but what is Log4j and why do people use it? Log4j is a logging solution and it runs on Java. That's why it's important to know about Java, but we also need to know about logging. We've talked a lot on this channel just about various different cybersecurity topics. If that's something that interests you, hit the subscribe button and definitely peruse the channel for more things that might interest you. But one of the things that we have talked about is logging and how important it is to be able to get, a good picture historically of what's happening on your system or network. That's where Log4j comes in. It is a logging solution that runs on Java. And if you're watching this and you have absolutely nothing to do with tech or cybersecurity, then don't worry, this video is still very much for you. Java is a coding language. It's been around for a very long time. You've probably, interacted or seen it or heard of it. So Log4j is used for logging on everything from Minecraft to iCloud to Steam to Twitter and Apache, even like the home lab Apache server that you have running in your virtual lab. So a lot of systems have Java, over 3 billion, and a lot of those systems have Log4j on it. And that takes us to the actual vulnerability itself. You see, here's the thing about logging. Normally you want to capture the logging message and then just store it as a string that's not executed, that's not read or interpreted by any other programs. It is literally a log that is kept in a logging folder like /var/log in Linux, and it just stays there. Log4j, however, allowed strings to reference outside destinations via the Java naming and directory interface, or JNDI, that's it, which allowed for data retrieval via the Lightweight Directory Access Protocol, or LDAP. Whoa, what? If that sounds like a lot and it went over your head, no worries. Basically, whenever Log4j stores a message, as it is designed to do, it is a logging solution. That message may contain a command to an outside destination and prompt the server that it's running on to connect to an outside destination. And that can then allow for data retrieval. Now, practically, what does that mean? If a message is stored in Log4j, reaches out to an outside destination, say to a server that is run by a hacker, then the hacker can then use that connection to pass arbitrary commands back to the server and do kind of whatever they're wanting to do. That is called remote code execution. That's pretty bad in and of itself, but it doesn't stop there. The attacker can do that while unauthenticated, meaning that they do not need the access to a user account to be able to perform any of these actions. This was most clearly demonstrated in Minecraft, where the chat box is where you can type in this command. And as soon as you type that command in, it prompts the server to connect to a server, say that the attacker owns, and then the attacker can run other arbitrary commands from that server. And that's it. They now have unauthenticated remote code execution. It's pretty bad. So that all sounds like a bunch of technical jargon and who really cares, right? What will attackers do with that access? Well, historically, they may do one of three things. They may do more than just one of these three things. But we're going to talk about the top 3 things I think that they may do here. The top 2, I think, are your most likely courses of action, but I think the third will be your most deadly course of action. Now, 1, they may install crypto miners. This has been a thing that cybersecurity researchers have seen in recent attacks, where attackers will exploit a recently disclosed vulnerability out in the wild, and then they'll install crypto miners and mine for crypto. I think that this is one of the more harmless outcomes, because I mean, that's going to kick up all the CPU. That'll indicate to you and the rest of the engineering staff that, okay, something clearly is running on this server that shouldn't be, and then you can take care of that problem then. Also, at least it isn't the second option, which is installing ransomware or selling to a ransomware vendor. This is one of the more dangerous courses of action. We've seen this a few times in 2021, including with the Colonial Pipelines attack, which shut down the flow of gas to the US East Coast for like a week. It was wild. Now, I think that the most dangerous course of action that could happen is they may attempt to expand their access to the network and then exfiltrate data. Why do I think that this is the most dangerous course of action? Because if they're able to expand access in the network, then the amount of ransomware that they can deploy in your network grows, the amount of money that they could extort from you grows, the amount of data that they can exfiltrate and then sell on the dark web grows. It can be a huge problem. And then also think about your company or your organization. You know, do you interact with third parties via some sort of a trusted gateway? Do you have subsidiaries that, you know, use your network or connect to it? Can attackers access those networks from yours? Do they have Log4j running on their systems, or do you have Log4j running on your internal systems? Researchers have already shown that attackers are having huge successes exploiting Log4j on internal non-internet facing systems. So don't think that just because your system is not internet facing that it's safe. Also, I want to be clear that, you know, if you're watching this and you're from the gaming community, definitely don't think that like your Minecraft server, for instance, is not of interest to an attacker. Literally any system that they can either sell access to a ransomware actor or install ransomware themselves and get even a little bit of money, that might be worth it to them. Or maybe they think that they can throw a crypto miner on your system and you won't notice. So any system is of interest to them. Definitely don't think that you're out of the woods. So now let's talk about protecting yourself from Log4j shell and kind of how that can be kind of tricky to maneuver, especially in this situation. See, the best course of action that you can take right now is to update or patch to the most recent version of pretty much anything possible, right? Most recent version of Log4j, most recent version of Apache, most recent version of Java, most recent version of Minecraft, what have you. In most big organizations, this may not necessarily be practical. See, upgrades and patches mean downtime, and downtime may mean either blind space if you're patching a security system, or it might mean lost revenue. And that's not to mention the different kinds of configuration issues that might arise while you're trying to patch these systems. Over time, this tends to result in a big and confusing web of outdated versions of systems that really is kind of cobbled together and held together by monitoring and keeping it behind several layers of security. But whenever it actually comes time to implement patching, it can be kind of a nightmare. And kind of on downtime and how that can be a problem, I mean, we're in the middle of the holiday season right now, and businesses want to maintain as much availability as humanly possible so that way they can provide their product to consumers leading up to Christmas. Telling them in the middle of the holiday season that you have to take systems down to implement patching, that might actually be not the conversation that they want to have right now, and they may try to kick the can down the road to January when it's simply too late. They may instead be looking for temporary fixes, like turning LDAP off. After all, the one-line command does rely on LDAP to be able to reference an outside vector that the attacker can use to pass commands. So if you turn that off, that actually doesn't stop the exploit, it just adds extra steps. Attackers have already shown that they're willing to take those extra steps in the name of gaining access and remote code execution to your system. So while it is a temporary thing that you can do, it's not necessarily a solution in and of itself. It's really just an inconvenience. So this really puts engineering teams and network architects and so on in a bind where they need to be able to try to implement patches and get their system secure from this vulnerability, which is inherently a nightmare, in the middle of one of the highest traffic seasons that the economy has. And trying to communicate with business people that they have to deliberately lose availability in the middle of the holiday season whenever we're only really a few weeks away from that traffic immediately going away and us entering the new year. Yeah, they may not want to do that right now. They might be kind of looking at this from a perspective of what will cost me more money, a cyber attack or the revenue that we're making right now in this high traffic season, and they might be willing to just accept the risk. Now, if you work in cybersecurity, you know that it's not really like that. It doesn't exactly go that way, and the costs that they may be thinking in their head are much, much smaller than the real costs that a cyber attack can have, especially whenever you factor in the kinds of data that attackers could gain access to in the event of a breach. So all of that is to say, this is bad. This is really, really, really bad. Like some cybersecurity researchers have publicly stated, this might just be one of the worst vulnerabilities of this decade. So it's really just a matter of time till massive data breaches happen. And if you're working on this right now to implement patches and upgrades, my hat goes off to you. And I really do hope that your organization is really working with you and hearing you right now, trying to get this situation resolved. Now, all of this sounds really complicated, and if you're watching this video and you're not from a technical background, don't worry, you're in exactly the right place because I have videos just for you. The top video is about cybersecurity threat actors, and I think that is a great place to jump into some of this material for you. The bottom video is on my last video on how to protect yourself from the Log4j shell vulnerability. And of course, like and subscribe. Let's hack this YouTube algorithm like it's Log4j.